talk. I think people are still trickling. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Very warm welcome to you all. I guess we can get started. It's 10 o'clock. My name is Namita Datta, and I am program manager of a global program that's called Solutions for Youth Employment that's based in the Jobs Group. It's my pleasure to welcome you all at this webinar that's called Youth Paving the Way, a Circular Approach to Construction. So we all know that we are in the middle of a climate crisis. In fact, if we look at all of the materials that we have extracted from this earth between 2000 to 2015, in just 15 years, it's almost more than half the total amount that we extracted from 1900 to 2000, so over 100 years. And this is rapidly increasing. And so sort of a movement towards a circular approach to how we live our lives and how we manufacture and extract materials and how we use them is really critical for the environment. So when we look at the literature on circularity, it's quite interesting. We looked at more than 10,000 studies, some of them in the gray literature. But what struck us were two things. One is that just 1.4% of these studies had any mention on work or jobs. So that's sort of missing in the narrative. The focus is on environment, but the people dimension and what it means for jobs and livelihoods is still quite starkly missing in the literature. But the other thing that struck us was out of all of this literature and all of the studies that we looked at, 85% of them were in the developed world. So what circularity means from a developing country point of view is again quite missing in the literature. And I hope that in this webinar today, we are going to address some of those issues which are really understudied and underfocused. And really sort of putting the dimension of jobs, of people, front and square of how we discuss this movement towards a greener environment or a circular approach to the environment. Because if we do not do that, we are going to continue with the assumption that what is good for the environment is also good for people. And that may not always be the case. Just look at the EV industry, the electric vehicles industry, it's good for the environment, I guess. But the EV industry requires batteries. Batteries require cobalt and lithium. They are mined in very poor conditions in Africa. So even though it's good for the environment, it may not be good for some people who are down in the value chain. So unless we put it front and square of our narrative, we might miss it. We might make some assumptions that may not be true. So, and the other thing is as for why we are very active on this agenda is because we think youth need to be a really key part of this dialogue for three reasons. One, youth are going to be the workforce of tomorrow. Secondly, youth are going to drive consumption patterns. So if you're going to be more circular in how we are consuming things, you are going to need the shift in the mindset of young people. And number three, youth can be really valuable allies in this. I mean, they are a source of huge amount of innovation and are in general more environmentally conscious. So we're really excited to be able to host this webinar today, which is going to focus on the construction sector. So I'm so delighted that we have 5 panelists. And before I introduce them, actually, I want to turn over to our manager, to Federica Saliola, who leads the jobs group in the bank. To provide some sort of kickoff remarks. So over to you, Federica.
Thank you, Namita, and greetings, everyone. And thank you for joining us today. It is a pleasure to welcome you to the Solution for Youth Employment webinar, where, as Namita said, we delve into the theme of youth paving the way, a circular economy to construction. Now, the construction sector, while integral to global development, poses significant environmental challenges, as it stands as one of the largest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions, accounting for a staggering 37% of global emissions. Yet, amid these challenges lies immense opportunities because the construction sector is not only a powerhouse of economic activity, but also a crucial employer globally, as it constitutes 7.7% of global employment, and it gets even higher in low middle income countries. For example, in India, the sector role is even more pronounced as it employs 71 million individuals. And by 2030, we project this figure to be 100 million. That really underline the sector pivotal role in fostering livelihoods and development. Now, in light of these realities, it becomes imperative to explore innovative approaches that address both environmental sustainability and youth employment. By embracing a circular economy approach within the construction sector, we can hold promise in this regard. We can reimagine processes that minimize waste, maximize resource efficiency, we can mitigate the environmental footprint of construction activities, but we can also unlock new avenues for job creation, particularly for the youth. And it is with this in mind that today's webinar promises to be an enriching journey into the scope, the discussion of sustainable construction practices and youth employment. This could really be a win-win scenario. Now, we have our distinguished panel. So we expect insightful discussion, share experiences that really aim to uncover the transformative potential of adopting circularity within the construction industry. So I really hope we can harness collective wisdom and innovation present here today to pave the way for a more sustainable, inclusive future. So with this, I very much look forward to the discussion, and I'll hand it over back to you, Namita. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Federica. That's like a perfect framework for the discussion on the importance of focusing on the construction sector from both an environment point of view, but also so critical for the jobs point of view. So I'm going to introduce our panelists, and I'm really grateful that each one of you took the time to join us today. So we have Stefan Ott, who is a circular economy specialist at the World Bank in the Finance, Competitiveness and Innovation Global Practice. And he's going to help us sort of just set the scene and just kind of frame the conversation. And after Stefan, I'm going to invite Babette Never, who is senior researcher at IDOS, which is the German Institute of Development and Sustainability in Germany. So she's sort of going to bring, and she will talk a little bit about her work in Rwanda. So a little bit kind of the academic perspective, if you wish. And then I'm delighted that we have Adriana Valero, who is Growth and Performance Global Manager at CEMEX. And CEMEX, we all know, is a leading construction company. So she will share with us a bit about what the private sector can do private sector is critical if we are going to adopt circular models. So from a private sector perspective, what are the challenges? What are the opportunities? So I'm very glad that Adriana could join us. And then we have Shamita Chaudhary, who is founder of Malba Project. This is a very interesting startup based in New Delhi. It also is doing very innovative work and also research on the circular built environment, particularly focused in India. And then we have Kidus Asfaw, who is founder and CEO of Cubic, which is also a really innovative company, environment tech company, doing quite interesting work in making materials to move from plastics to very environmentally sustainable materials for construction. And his work is mainly based in Africa. So we have quite an interesting perspective. I can't wait to hear all of the insights that you will all bring in. So first, over to you, Stefan.
Thank you very much, Namita. Good morning, everyone. It's really great to be here, and it's really great that we're talking about construction today, because construction is not just one sector. It's usually one of the most prominent sectors in most of our client countries. As with the World Bank deal, especially, client countries are for us all the countries that are like either low income, middle income, or even some of them are upper middle income countries. And I think it's when we think of construction, what do we actually mean with construction sector? So I think it's let's just take a moment to let this go through our head. I think we need to be clear that construction is everything from your building that you're probably currently sitting in, which might be residential, which might be commercial, but it's also everything that's going on in the infrastructure sector. If it's a power plant, if it's a manufacturing plant, if it's a bridge, a road, all these things are basically part of the construction sector, which makes it such an important sector, especially in countries that we deal with, which are countries that have a growing material stock. So countries that have that every year put net more materials into their into the buildup of their material stock in the economy, because they still have a lot of infrastructure and other crucial buildings, etc., to develop, where also economic growth drives the construction sector very strongly. I think what is important, there were a couple of numbers already mentioned, and I just want to give two more, which is according to World Resources report 2024, construction has a value-added contribution of 13% globally, and it consumes, well, the material demand of the construction sector globally is 30.6 billion tons. So we have, it's very difficult to even imagine these numbers. But I think the material consumption is what makes the construction sector such an important sector to look into when we talk about circular economy, because especially the materials that are used in the construction sector also happen to be often the most energy, and through the energy coming from fossil resources, also often the most GHG intensive emission materials. So when we deal with the construction sector, should we just think about, do we just change the material inputs, or should we change about the way we use buildings, the way we use and build infrastructure? And I think that's where the circular economy comes in and is key. There's one more thing that is, I think, very interesting to know, is that through a circular economy, because we talk a lot about jobs today, and it is really an under-investigated field where we should definitely do more work, it is expected estimations. There's a lot of numbers out there, but just in terms of landfilling, a lot of the construction waste today goes to landfill, versus which this creates about per 1,000 tons of material about 1 to 2 jobs, versus estimations think that if you reuse and refurbish and remanufacture, which are kind of the under the R frameworks of the circular economy, we could create up to 29 jobs per 1,000 tons. And these are just some numbers that are out there. I'm sure there are different numbers that we can reference, but what is important is I think we have to think about business models that create economic value while at the same time creating the jobs that we need in those countries. And I think the five, maybe just briefly, the 5 circular economy business models that are out there are very suitable to apply to the construction sector, because can we think about repurposing a building? Do we always have to build something new? And if we build something new, how do we build it so that it lasts for a long time, and that it also can make sure that it's used efficiently, and that we don't just focus on energy efficiency? Because this is one of the things that in a lot of governments that we have worked with for now, is the focus is often on energy efficiency, which basically bypasses the whole question of efficacy. So is it even, do we even need this kind of building? What kind of infrastructure do we need? How should we build it? And how do we avoid mistakes from the past? For example, and there's a very prominent example, is the asbestos buildings, that we still deal today, 50 years afterwards, with the consequences of using materials that we basically don't know how to dispose of. And I think this is what the circular economy tries to tackle. So we have different approaches. We have material-based approaches. How do we switch the materials to materials that are more sustainable, less emission intensive? We have process-based approaches, meaning can we build in a different way so that we know what's in the building, so we can actually recover at the end of the life of the building, again, what's in the building. And maybe there are also more innovative approaches out there that completely rethink the purpose of not only building, but the built environment in itself. Can we use a building in a different way? Can we use maybe even real estate in empty towns, as it is in the United States or others, where basically the towns are not so frequent anymore because a lot of the offices have gone remote? Are there opportunities and business opportunities that we can look into that then also create the jobs that we need at the end of the day? And I think that's what I want to leave you with today. This is kind of what the context is in terms of the conversation that we want to have today. There's a lot of questions, and the World Bank is very good at asking questions. Now I'm looking to the private sector colleagues that will hopefully be able to give us at least partial answers to some of the things. Of course, we also have to do our homework and have to look deeper into the topic of the construction sector. It's definitely one of the most fascinating sectors, although it is a very traditional and kind of old conservative sector in some parts. But rethinking and applying basically the entire R framework, meaning rethinking, repurposing, reusing in the construction sector are more relevant than ever. And with this, I want to give back to Namita. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefan. I really loved that point about, when we think about circularity in construction, you automatically think it's about sustainable materials that go as input and a green building, which is energy efficient. But you're so right that it's also about how we use what's already built and repurpose it and extend its life. And maybe in the Q&A, if you don't mind, coming back with some maybe examples of the second question that you raised, which is so interesting. Like, are there some interesting ways we could be thinking about using our already built environment? Because I guess there it's not so much about maybe the private sector, but it's more maybe regulatory, how we do our urban planning. So if you don't mind coming back with like a few examples, just because I think that's such an interesting point that you made. With that, over to you, Babette. You will share with us your work in Rwanda, right?
Sure. Thank you very much, Namita. And I have to say, as a researcher, I'm also in the camp of asking questions, but hopefully I'll also be able to provide some answers or some insights from our research. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a research project we're doing in Rwanda, really looking at the questions Namita was talking about at the beginning. So how to combine the circular and the job aspect. And in this project, we are basically trying to find out if we move more towards a green construction sector, a circular construction sector in Rwanda, which is partly already happening, what kind of jobs will be created, which ones will get lost. And we've already done some qualitative work on this. I've just come back from Rwanda a couple of weeks ago, and we're about to start a quantitative survey along the whole construction value chain. So anyone in the audience interested in more detail, please also feel free to contact me afterwards. But now let's just zoom into what's happening in Rwanda. Next slide, please. So what's the potential in green cities? What's the potential in Kigali as capital city in Rwanda? In the back of the slide, you see a picture from Wakanda, which is from the movie Black Panther. I don't know if anyone's seen that, which is among architects counts as a sort of green utopia city where different buildings exist with traditional materials, local materials, new materials, solar PV, different ways of living and working together. And that's a little bit the vision the Rwandan government actually has with a project called Green City Kigali, where they're planning to construct a totally new district on a hill on the outskirts of town, where at the moment there's just greenery. And they're really trying to build differently. It's a huge project. I'm not sure how much of this will happen when, but the idea is there. And generally in African cities, in Rwanda, also it's more still about building new buildings and actually doing this in a greener way from the beginning to avoid carbon lock-in, to explore the potential of blue-green infrastructure, to also mitigate temperature rise. Build resources efficiently, durability, sustainability, the elements Stefan just mentioned, and also create jobs, which I also believe has a huge potential. Next slide, please. So from a research perspective, these are some of the advantages in industrial policy that focuses on creating compact cities And mixed-use cities will have, from proximity of markets, employment creation potential, learning potential, reduction of car dependency, creating buildings that are made from local materials, durable materials that can be reused, but also reducing distance, so people don't have to travel all over the place. And that is, in a way, a bit the vision the Rwandan government has for this particular Green City Kigali project. And they are doing a lot in the whole construction sector. So there are various green programs going on. There are standards for different materials. So there's a green building compliance system, which doesn't work too well, I have to admit. So as in many countries, good ideas are there, but the implementation is a bit challenging. So there's a whole range of tools. Yeah, thank you. Here's some, you can keep the next slide, that's fine. Some examples of the mix of materials which are being used and how buildings look like. At the top left, that's the flagship green building in Rwanda. It's made from local clay bricks and a lot of local materials. There are overall 2-3 types of local materials, so different type of clay bricks, fired, unfired, volcanic stone, and a little bit of timber, which are sort of the bio-based materials available within Rwanda. Cement is now being produced more, but unfortunately not the sustainable version yet. So at the moment, also the government has a bit of a dual strategy. They're pushing the cement industry, and at the same time they're pushing a lot for these local materials, which is not so easy. That they've been telling me, okay, we are trying to target different market segments because we need these green and affordable buildings, especially for rural communities, for low-income communities who cannot afford any building that costs more than like $10,000. That's even hard for many people. So there they have to provide opportunities also for financing and so on. But there are also clients who require multi-story buildings, commercial buildings, which could be done with clay, could be done with cement combinations. So there's a whole range of options out there. And maybe finishing on my view on where employment potential is. It's especially among the young people in the construction sector. Actually, the Swiss Development Agency and the Belgian Development Agency, they've both run programs in the construction sector, one explicitly on circular economy, one a bit mixed, and they've managed to create 8,000 to 9,000 jobs in the past 10 years for the Swiss, and the Belgians about 3,000 jobs in 5 years with their specific circular economy training. And that wasn't entirely geared towards young people, but especially the young entrepreneurs, they want to learn new things. They may have new ideas. So that's one part where I see more potential. And also, secondly, I think there's in a way a sort of shadow circular economy already happening in this trade of used materials. So demolition waste, used materials, people are reusing these. They are sort of integrating those into buildings. Sometimes maybe it's not perfect for the stability of the building, so they're sort of formalizing this system, which would help, but actually also recognizing what's going on and pushing for that as a real element of a circular economy value chain, construction value chain, what I think would be really beneficial to both employment and greening. And that's me for the moment.
Thank you, Babette. I would love in the question answer session to understand a little bit more your thoughts about that trade-off then between the government wanting to promote denser urban environment with higher population density, which by definition then will require high-rise buildings, right? Versus using local materials. So I wonder like what your thoughts are on that, just from an environment point of view, but then also jobs. And then something on your slide, like I think one of your slides said, this is the government's approach to also increase female labor force participation. I was curious how they are approaching that, but maybe we'll come to the questions later. But thank you very much for that. I want to now move to the private sector and see, Adriana, you are with us, right? Adriana Valero from CEMEX. Over to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm very excited to be here and have this conversation with all of you and talk about how the circular economy looks like in the construction materials industry. As you know, CEMEX, it's a global provider of the construction materials, cement, ready-mix, concrete. Then we also have this business of urbanization solutions, which is focused on delivering solutions for this growth of the world and the trends of needing to build more resilient cities more quickly with more sustainable attributes. So circularity is a pillar also within CEMEX and what we're doing. So, but let me go to the next slide and begin providing a bit of color of the challenge that we're facing for the coming years. The United Nations has projected that by 2050, 2 out of 3 people will be living in cities. So these metropolises will begin to get all crowded, and all this migration, of course, increases the strain on the resources to build all the infrastructure needed to have all these people living there. You know, you mentioned before, Stefan, the roads, the bridges, schools, houses, everything has to do with all these needing to provide a home and a life for all of people. So we go to the next slide. What does this migration mean in terms of construction? The projection also includes that we will need to build the equivalent of 1 New York City every month for the next 40 years. This is around 230 billion square meters of new floor area. So the challenge is relevant. It's impressive, actually. And given that today the built environment is responsible of extracting 50% of all materials, we talked about electricity, 50% of global energy is consumed all through the built environment, you know, from the production, extraction, production of the materials, but then the built environment living every day. And not we only extract 50% of the materials, but waste is generated every year from the total volume of waste the world produces, 33% comes from the building sector or the built environment. And here we have a picture of the type of waste that comes from construction, demolition, and excavation waste. Ready-mix, bricks, wood, steel, glass. From this massive amount, the projection is around 3 to 4 billion tons of waste. So you mentioned, where does all this waste go? Where do we put it? It's a relevant problem too. From this volume, around 50%, and if we click, please, 50% is comprised by ready-mix concrete, the material that we produce. But ready-mix is the most used man-made material in the world, and it's essential for the society to thrive. But one wonderful thing is that ready-mix is infinitely recyclable. So we are aware that the construction sector, is responsible or a big part of the challenge on sustainability in the world. But we also know that we can be a key factor on alleviating and doing something about it. So if we go to the next slide, please. In CEMEX, we have developed this program that we named Future in Action. And it's a way to define our path moving forward on how we're going to proceed and how we're going to really take action on all these challenges that the world has. And we have several goals, but the main goal and the main target is to become a net zero CO2 company by 2050. To do so, we know that it's not only measuring our emissions and working on our processes. We know, as we can say now, it takes a village. And we define 6 pillars to really tackle this. And these pillars all work together and each help the other one, but each pillar has specific pathways and work streams and goals. Here you can see in the slide, of course, we're focused on delivering sustainable products and solutions, decarbonizing our operations. But to do so, we know that one strong lever will be circular economy. So we're going deeply into circular economy, taking it seriously and turning circular economy also into a business, a strong revenue stream that develops more, that helps in the workforce, but also brings innovation. And to do so, we need the pillar that's about innovation and partnership. And we also need to promote a green economy. This means advocacy, this means regulation, norms. So we know that we have to work together with different stakeholders across different industries and governments and ONGs. And of course, we are very aware of water and biodiversity. We have plans to reduce, reuse the water. We work with all our quarries. We have reforestation and restoration plans. So this is a broad program, as you can see. But let me go to the next slide and talk about our circularity pillar. And the way we walk the talk in circularity is through Regenera. Regenera is a business we launched recently, though we're not in circularity recently. We've been working with circularity mindset for more than 20 years. But with Regenera, what we are doing is be more vocal, have a clear mindset on what we want to achieve and measure and invest in what we want to achieve. So Regenera is this circularity solutions company that provides solutions to external or our customers, working with waste and delivering waste management solutions and using the waste to transform it and be able to avoid landfill. We're focused in 3 main waste streams. Let me go briefly through them. Municipal and industrial waste, as you know, comprises around 50% of the global waste. And it's all this post-consumer waste that comes from our households, our cities, and everything that we use and dispose. This waste, we sort it. All the recyclable materials are sent to recyclers, and all the non-recyclable fraction is transformed into alternative fuels to be used instead of fossil fuels in our kilns to produce cement. So by this we avoid the landfilling of this waste that produces methane and reduce our consumption of fossil fuels. The other 2 waste streams, the byproducts and waste from other industries that are materials that are useful for the production of cement and ready mix. And the construction demolition waste, as we saw the picture, previous picture, we can sort it, process it, crush it, etc., and return it back to being recycled aggregates or raw material instead of using virgin materials. So Cemex, by this, it's trying to reduce the virgin material use and using products that are already there and are waste for someone else. And we have, of course, more sustainable processes, and our high quality standard products are delivered with recycled materials within. With this, in 2023, we were able to manage and process 28 million tons of waste, which is equivalent to the waste England generates in 1 year. So it's relevant. And we are very, very happy to say that a big portion of that waste would have ended in landfills or in oceans or in rivers, and instead of that, it was returned to the economy. We go to the next slide. Talking about jobs, in this transition from a linear economy to a circular economy, Regenera, it's not a show from CEMEX only. It's a collaboration with other companies, with partners that we partner with and sign long-term contracts or commercial alliances or joint ventures to really work along the value chain. Circularity, as you know, it's a very local business, or it's a very local activity. We need to be efficient in logistics. We need to be efficient in all the movement of the materials. So we are close to the source of the waste, and we move it in the most efficient way into our facilities, where we process this waste and transform it into reusable materials. So collaboration is key. And we have a footprint, global footprint with Regenera, working in these 3 waste streams that I mentioned. Next slide, please. So the circular mindset is I think, the foundation of this effort. We all need to think on how we can move forward, reducing waste, reusing materials, extending the life cycle, recycling the most, to really get to a point where waste can be minimized, and this is by design. We have really understood that there's key enablers for this to happen. Regulation is one. We need to incentivize and have policies that incentivize the circularity of the economy. We need to incentivize people to jump in and make this also a business. I mean, people need to see the value in this, and regulation can provide a good lever for this to happen. Innovation and technology, of course, and stakeholder alignment. And one very basic aspect is education. So if we go to the next slide, CEMEX.
Adriana, can I request you to wind up? I just also want to make sure that the other 2 panelists get some time.
Sure.
So please.
Yeah, of course. So we do have education within with all our colleagues. More than 23,000 people are involved in the training of different courses. Of course, sustainability is mandatory. And if we go to the next one, and with this one I can close. 70% of our supply chain is comprised of local, small and medium enterprises. And through our social impact efforts, we have different programs, and I want to highlight these 2. We're working with the United Nations Global Impact, providing training to participants in 5 geographies, talking about sustainability journey and how they can jump into these efforts. And one very relevant is also the Circular World program that we're focusing on youth, on kids, to make them aware on how this world works and all the potential that they have to make a world a better future. So thank you very much, and eager to listen to the rest of our panelists.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Adriana. That's really interesting. And I had like so many questions that came to mind as I was listening to you, but I'll just share like a couple that are top of my mind. First, I was wondering, like, if the world was to kind of implement, let's say, what Stefan said about, rethinking about reusing our buildings and not building more buildings. And if we also implemented what Babette said, which is to use local materials, is CEMEX worried that this would affect your bottom line? Like it's bad for your business, right? If the construction industry generally becomes more circular, at some level, it must be bad for your business. Because at the end of the day, we want companies like yours to be making profits and be vibrant and commercially viable. So I just wonder, like, what the business reaction to this is. And then the second, I was curious about Regenera. Have you implemented this? Because this would be music to any mayor's ears, right? That you might actually buy back some of the solid waste and the industrial waste from landing in the landfills. You would actually buy it and create new materials. So have you implemented this anywhere?
Yeah, it's operating in all our geographies. It was launched last year. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So just curious to hear how that went. And then third, I was curious whether you mentioned regulation is important. And I was wondering from your point of view, what might be the one piece of regulation that if you could change or influence, what might it be? And so maybe you don't have to answer it right away, but we'll get back to it in the Q&A. But thank you very much. And I want to, with that, move to Shamita. Shamita Chaudhary is founder of the Malba project, which is doing really interesting work in India. Over to you, Shamita.
Thanks for introducing me, Namita, and thanks for having me, everyone. Okay, so hi to everyone. I'm Shamita. I am an architect. I have a master's degree in circular economy, and I founded Malba Project back in 2021 to facilitate a circular transition in the Indian construction sector. Just for those who are a little bit confused about what Malba means, it is the colloquially used Hindi word for construction and demolition waste. Next slide, please. Yeah. So as an architect and someone working in the circular economy industry, you might wonder of all the waste streams that I could have worked with, why C&D waste? And of all the parts of the value chain that I could have worked with, why waste management? Why end of life? So just to talk a little bit about this waste stream. So C&D waste, or Malba as we call it in Hindi, is the bulkiest waste stream in the world. It accounts for 30 to 40% of all solid waste. It significantly contributes to air and water pollution. It impacts health and well-being. And it is a topic of grave concern in developing urban metropolises around the world. And while around the world, everybody is talking about preventing the sending of these materials to the landfill, in India, we're still talking about the problem of prevention of illegal dumping. So that is the vision with which we started Malba Project, to prevent this material from being illegally dumped and not sending it to the landfill, but actually sending it for recycling. So next slide, please. Yeah. So what we realized was that in India, we have everything that we need to make this 100% recyclable material actually get recycled. We have the plants. In a city like Delhi, we have about 5 construction and demolition waste recycling plants, which is more than some of the most developed nations around the world. And while they're operating at a decent capacity, about 50% of the waste that we generate every day is leaking from the value chain and is landing up in our drains, in our parks, in our forests, in our rivers, and is really impacting the quality of life in our cities. And while everybody talks about circular economy from an environmental perspective, everybody talks about it from a climate change perspective. And just to give you an idea of how large this problem is, India is currently the second largest generator of C&D waste in the world. So we generate about 530 million tons each year. And if we look across the country, we're still only recycling 1% of it. So every time this material does not get recycled, next slide, please. Annually, this is how much we're generating, about 865 billion kgs of CO2, which could very well be prevented because the technology and everything we require is already there to solve it. Next slide. But in a city like, in a country like India, our opportunity is actually goes hand in hand with our social impact. So here is how we decided to leverage social impact and turn it into an opportunity to facilitate a circular transition. Next slide, please. So one of the first things that we did was to actually start generating information that people could use about circularity. So if you go online and you search for C&D waste collection, like where do I take my waste? How do I dispose my waste? You will get no answers. And this is how we started. We would find articles in the newspaper from the government saying in a city of Delhi, we have 5 recycling plants and we have over 250 collection points. But if you actually try to Google, how do I find these collection points, there was nothing available. So it took me about 6 months to get this information out from government offices that where could these points actually be located, and another 6 months to actually start mapping this out and put it on a digital platform. You can scan this QR code to like check out how the map looks. But next slide, please, and I'll show you how we did it. Yeah, so we mapped this out with the help of volunteers. And this served a dual purpose, of course. It helped raise awareness about how to see this waste, because if you come to India, you go to any Indian city, C&D waste is so ubiquitous in our urban environment that it's almost invisible to the naked eye. Like you step out of your door and you'll probably have Malba there, but you will not notice it. So the first thing was teaching people how to see it. And the second thing was getting them to report it as a way to also generate on-ground data about waste, which was also very missing. Next slide. And then what we developed over the past 3 years that we've been operating is what we call the My Malba management system. It was a readily deployable suite of solutions for cities to manage their waste. So we said that cities already have recycling plants, but clearly the waste is not reaching them. So this is how the logistics and different, like the solution would work for different stakeholders. It is a 3-part solution. The first part is focusing on the urban local body. Um, it is a collection point management app in a way, which creates a digital check-in of Malba. It kind of forms the interface between a formal sector and an informal sector interaction. And it helps generate localized waste data. So while the Malba hauler might have a QR code sticker which is stuck on his truck, so if anyone doesn't know how to operate smartphones, is not very comfortable with tech, it's just a simple sticker which is on his truck. He brings his Malba to a collection facility. We have a digital check-in. We create a like a waste KPI dashboard, which then the ULB can also use for reporting at a later stage. The most interesting part of our solution is the My Malba Sathi interface, which is something that is hauler focused. It's a low tech interface for haulers. It is applicable to different modes of transport. So for example, it can be applied to a truck, but also a bicycle drawn rickshaw or a bicycle drawn cart. It can also be applied to say a donkey carriage, which is also how C&D waste is taken out from many different parts of the city still, because Indian cities are planned very differently and have many layers that look very different from how it would look maybe in the western part of the world. So we create these like low-tech touch points for our haulers. We incentivize them to make sure their documents are all complete. We say that you can only join our system once you have your pollution check in order. So preventing air pollution, preventing lowering carbon emissions even there. And we also educate them on what norm compliance looks like. How should they be managing their waste ideally? Then the third part of this system is client focused. It's a single point of contact for construction companies to manage their waste. So it's not just C&D which comes out from a construction site. Sometimes it's hazardous, toxic, biomedical, and these things also have to be managed. So we create a single touch point. We create easy tracking, and we basically streamline waste payments as well. So maybe companies like Civics can focus on making better buildings while we handle the logistics of their waste management. So that essentially is what we're trying to do. Next slide, please. So we conducted 2 pilot projects in collaboration with the Municipal Corporation of Delhi. And in a span of 4 months, we built a network of about 49 trucks, 19 bicycle-drawn rickshaw carts. We conducted IEC activities, basically doing street plays, street exhibitions, getting people to participate in our walks. We
Shamita?
trained the personnel of the municipal corporation. Okay, I'm wrapping up. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
done.
no, this is so interesting that but if you don't mind, just wrap.
Sorry, yes, please go on. Did you have a comment or should I continue?
No, I was just saying if you don't mind wrapping up because I also want to give
Absolutely. Absolutely. Next slide, please. Yeah. Okay, so okay, next slide. I think I'll just wrap up. So, okay, while we diverted, we made a blip of an impact in the large impact potential. We diverted about 5 million kgs of Malba, avoided about 35,000 kgs of carbon emissions. But more importantly, come to the next slide, please. So in the construction sector in India, it's largely, if there are 70 million people who are employed here, I would say over 90%, and there are reports to validate this, over 90% are informally employed, and their profits are very low. They make their quality of work is really low. We saw an increase of 40 to 90% in haulers' profits. But the real win for us was the fact that when we started the pilot, it used to take us about 1 week to fill up a collection point. But by the time we ended, in the first few hours of operation, it was already full. There was such a high demand from the informal sector for this service. And next slide, please. Yeah. Okay. I want to end with this, these 2 testimonials which show how the formal-informal sector integration happened very beautifully. The first is a comment from the Deputy Commissioner who
Sorry,
was really
Shamita,
happy.
I do need to cut you short. I'm so
Okay.
sorry, but I would love to. But this is so interesting, and I think there are so many questions here and so many things to learn
Okay.
from what you've
Sure.
done, just using technology. I was also curious about the incentive structures, who's paying
Okay.
these Malba drivers. I wasn't sure. This is really very interesting, and it feels so replicable that it can be done in other parts of the developing world, particularly where mobile phones are now becoming, everybody almost has a mobile phone. But maybe if we have time, we'll come back to this. But thank you so much. This was super interesting.
Sure.
With that, I want to move to Kidus Asfau, who's founder and CEO of Cubic, which is an environment tech company, but in the Africa context. So maybe over to you, Kidus.
Thanks so much, Namita. And hi, everyone. Thanks so much for taking the time to hear about our perspectives on this really important topic. I'll try to keep mine a little bit more focused around how we've been creating jobs in a very circular way through our business. So what Cubic does is upcycle hard-to-recycle plastic waste into low-carbon and low-cost building materials. There's several things that we're trying to address all at once. Obviously, making sure that we can end plastic waste. We want to drive down the cost of having a decent home by making building materials cheaper. But we also want to make sure that we can reduce the greenhouse gas impact that comes from the construction industry as well. Now, what you're seeing here is our head of supply chain. Her name is Haimanot. One of the interesting things about how we conduct our business is we are not a recycling company. We actually directly go to waste pickers and we buy plastic waste in the tons every day. Currently, we buy about 5,000 kilos per day, and we're gradually scaling up to about 50,000 kilos every single day. The reason why what we do is really important to us is instead of trying to create an entire supply chain around plastic waste, we actually provide that opportunity to existing waste pickers. So where you see Haymanot right now on this picture is in eastern Ethiopia in a town called Harar. The municipality invited us and said, can you please take all of this plastic away from us? Within a course of 6 weeks, we were able to get over 1,000 waste pickers employed. We were able to increase their income by over 4 times what they used to make, but we were also able to provide them with a dignified way of doing this. We provide them with uniforms, with personal protective equipment. We provide them with banking, which most of them never had. But then we're also able to invite other social enterprises to provide them with other services such as bookkeeping, ways of actually making them.
Oh dear, I think we lost. Is it just me? I think we can't hear him, right?
We can't hear him.
Yeah, yeah. Kiddos, we can't hear you. I don't know if you want to. Did you, maybe you accidentally muted yourself? No.
Maybe it's a connection issue because the video has gone off as well.
We'll just give it a few seconds. Sarah, are you in touch with him? Is he?
Kiddos, we can see you, but we can't hear you.
Oh, there. We can see you now. Kiddos, can you say something to just
Yes,
check?
can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
My next business will be to make internet in Ethiopia much
Ah,
faster.
Yay. Buy your ad and do that in Washington as well.
Well, just to summarize on that previous slide, instead of just focusing on reducing plastic waste, we're also finding ways of providing dignified jobs for women in this line of business as well. So next slide. Now, the other part of our business is manufacturing. So what you see here is a facility that we have in Ethiopia, which is taking all of that plastic waste and making it into building materials, such as bricks, like the one that Samira and Nigist on this picture are assembling. Now, one of the pieces around job creation that we don't talk enough about, especially within the green economy, is skills. Samira, who's the lady in the yellow hard hat, used to be a waste picker. When we employed her, she was coming in to actually help us around sorting plastic waste. But one of the things that we were quickly able to do is start to upskill her around the technology of conversion of waste into the building materials that you see here. Samira right now is actually the head of quality control for Cubic in this factory. One of the things that we actually see as a potential in innovations like the ones that we have at Cubic is taking individuals that never really had a fighting chance of having a skilled job and being able to train them and being able to actually having them lead in innovations like this. We believe that this is going to be a really big opportunity for us as a company, but also in markets like Ethiopia, which is a market of 120 million people, to actually find pathways for low-skilled labor to participate in such a high-skilled market like the construction industry. So next slide. And all of that brings us to what we actually build at the end, which is these type of beautiful homes. Now, With construction, especially in markets like Ethiopia, what we see is this pyramid of a lot of low-skilled labor getting very, very little wage, and then a few very high-end engineers that make a lot of money. Now, one of the things that we've been able to kind of turn over is, we have a technology where you're basically building large Lego blocks. So we've been able to provide individuals with higher income to actually become contractors, right? So our business model has been that whenever we sell our product to real estate developers, we actually license low-skilled individuals that have gone through a program to understand how to assemble our material and have exclusivity to actually assemble through these projects. So in a nutshell, what we've done is not only end plastic waste, reduce the cost of buildings, or fight climate change, but we have also been able to increase employability and create jobs in a new market. We're not innovators in this. I think there's so many incredible startups throughout the world that are focusing on making Earth a more livable planet. But at the same time, we're also thinking about how we're uplifting individuals along the way. Thank you.
Namita, you're muted.
I was just saying this is so remarkable because you're affecting two value chains. It's not just the construction value chain, but also the plastics. And maybe I missed it, but I was curious what that technology is, where you take the plastic and then convert it to construction material and make those beautiful homes. Because and I really appreciate that you touched on the jobs aspect so clearly, particularly improving the quality of these jobs and upskilling these people, because that's really what is critical. I mean, I think a lot of developing countries are quite circular in some sense. There is a lot of reuse and repair because people, it's out of survival, it's out of need. People don't want to waste things. So in that sense, there is that angle, but I think what's needed in the developing country context is the skills. The skills are connecting people to more formal value chains. So I really, really enjoyed listening to you. And I'm going to abuse my role as a moderator to go over maybe a couple more minutes, if you all don't mind, because this was such an interesting session. And if you all have like just a few minutes, and maybe we won't go through all the questions that have come up. There are lots of questions that have come up. But just one question, perhaps, and just request for really short answers. Perhaps to you, Adriana, and also to Shamita. There's a question that came up about: have you explored your models? You with Regenera and Shamita, you with Malba. Have you explored ever considering going to disaster areas where there's just been, let's say, an earthquake, or where there is so much of building debris? And have you ever explored that as a potential use of the technologies that you're developing?
I can answer that. Yeah, that's definitely something that I did consider, but I think we're very dependent on there being a recycling plant existing in the area. So if there is a recycling plant already, then of course we can take it there. But that technology is expensive and needs to be commissioned already for us to work.
Adriana, did you want to comment?
Yes, of course. Regenera is this service provider on recovering the waste, and we have the infrastructure. Cemex also, we benefit in our business model that we have a widespread footprint, and the equipment and machinery and different types of trucks and logistics services, that we can definitely be a key player, and we have been key players on disasters. Recently, we had in Acapulco, a hurricane that devastated the city, and there we were able to be a key player in cleaning the city, recovering the waste. There was a lot of, you know, trees and palm trees and biomass that if it was left there, of the contamination and pollution that would have happened, we brought it in and we transformed it. So yes, it's part of the activities we're able to do. It's not the daily, hopefully, less disasters happen. But yes,
No, thank you. Yeah, no, thank you, Adriana. And there are so many other interesting questions that I don't know if we're going to have the time, but I just want to finally also turn to Stefan. I don't know if you had, I'm sure you had so many sort of things that must have come to your mind as we were listening to this. Any final sort of reflections from your side?
No, thank you, Namita. It's really inspiring, especially to hear from the practice examples and the practical examples that work today. And I think one key takeaway that I didn't make before, but I want to make now is I think a lot of circularities, especially in low-income countries and in countries that the World Bank works with, is already happening, but on an invisible level, in an informal way where people informally make their living out of business models that could be or are circular, but just are not visible yet because they run below and the radar, so to say. And I think it's a big job for basically us as an institution in economic development to make sure that these business models serve the right people to create these quality jobs that those people need in viable business models. And I think that's why I focused on the business models before, because what we've seen, I think, throughout the panelists now is once we create a working business model that is basically also having revenues and profits, that's where also the jobs can come in more easily on a formal level. And then it's about investing in skills and investing in the other things. But I think we need to see as kind of a takeaway from this conversation is what are the policies that we need in order for these business models to work and to be competitive with existing linear non-circular business models. I think this is one of the key takeaways that I wanted to make.
I fully agree that there may be some win-win spots here where we can address both the environment, but also create also use these to create viable business models that perhaps connect to formal value chains. But I also just so inspired by Kidu's very intentional upfront. It's not just about creating the technology which is environmentally friendly, but to actually be intentional about also working with people and ensuring that they are now skilled enough to be doing these environmentally beneficial jobs and supporting these enterprises. So I think embedding that in the environment business models is so critical. And I think each one of you touched on some aspect of that. We went hopelessly over time. I did a really bad job of keeping us to the time, but I hope that this was interesting for all of you. There was just so much insight and experience here, and it's been quite an inspiring panel. So I just want to say a big thank you to you all for sharing your expertise, your time, and your experience with us. We will share the recording and also the slides that the panelists presented on our website. So stay tuned.